Before I tell you this story, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible, and I need to know there are people out there who'll remember it, who'll remember me, just in case. I am Antoine Doucet, a police officer with the Port Authority of Louisiana. At least I was, but now I'm not sure of anything, though we've taken this matter quite far. Let's start at the beginning, back when I didn't know who I was. It was September of 1998, and the morning came to Barataria Bay the way it always did, slow and thick as molasses. I was 34 years old, 8 years on the force, and I thought I knew every channel, every island, every shallow spot in those waters. My grandfather had been a shrimper out here, my great-grandfather before him. The bayou was in my blood, 8 generations deep. That morning, I kissed my wife Celeste goodbye in the pre-dawn darkness of our house in Marrero. She was already dressed for her shift at Oxner Hospital, her nurse's scrubs crisp and white. "Be careful out there," she said, like she always did. "Always am," I said, like I always did. My daughter Marie was still asleep, curled up in her bed with her stuffed alligator, Mr. Chomps. She was 8 years old, with her mother's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Je t'aime, ma petite." I didn't know that would be one of the last mornings I'd remember clearly. That Celeste's smile, Marie's peaceful sleeping face, the smell of coffee brewing in our kitchen, all of it would soon become just another thing I'd lost to the fog. I drove south in my truck, past the sprawl of Metairie and into the wetlands. The Port Authority station was in Jean Lafitte, a small town that took its name from the pirate who'd once ruled these waters. Tourists came through sometimes, heading to the national park, looking for alligators and history. They never stayed long. There was something about Barataria Bay that made outsiders uncomfortable, a feeling that they were trespassing in a place that remembered older laws. My partner that morning was supposed to be Officer Trey Robichaux, but he'd called in sick. So I was solo, which suited me fine. I signed out Patrol Boat 7, checked the engine, the radio, the life vests, everything by the book. Then I headed out into the labyrinth of channels and bayous that made up the bay. The water was dark that morning, the color of coffee with too much chicory. Spanish moss hung from the cypress trees in gray curtains, and the air was so humid you could feel it coating your skin. Herons stood like gray ghosts in the shallows, and somewhere in the distance I heard the deep bellow of a gator. I was checking crab traps for compliance when I saw Boudreaux. Old man Boudreaux had been fishing these waters longer than I'd been alive. He was in his 70s, skin like tanned leather, hands gnarled from decades of pulling nets. He was loading his boat at a small dock, but he stopped when he saw me approach. "Morning, Officer Doucet," he called out in Cajun-accented English. "Morning, Mr. Boudreaux. Catch anything good?" "Hey, some shrimp, some crab. Not much." He squinted at me, then at the water behind me. "You heading south today?" "Just routine patrol." "Why?" He hesitated, the way locals always did when they were about to share something that might sound crazy to outsiders. "The fog's thick down there today, real thick. You see it? You turn around, yeah?" "Just fog, Mr. Boudreaux." "No, Cher. Not just fog. Not that fog." He set down his gear and walked to the edge of his dock. "You know what the old folks used to call it? La ligne de brouillard, the fog line. You see it, you know it, and you don't cross it, no sir." "What happens if you cross it?" Boudreaux's eyes went distant. "My uncle. He crossed it once. 1957. I was just a boy. He came back different. Couldn't remember his own wife's name. And she said he wasn't the same man she married. Said he moved wrong, talked wrong, like something wearing his skin. He shook his head. 2 weeks later, he went back into that fog. Never came out. My aunt, she went to the police, but what could they say? Man disappeared in the fog. Happens. I'll be careful, I promised. No, you won't. Nobody ever is. That's how it gets you. I left Boudreaux at his dock and continued south. The channels grew narrower here, the vegetation thicker. The cypress trees were old, some of them centuries old, their trunks massive and gnarled. Alligators slipped into the water as I passed, only their eyes visible above the surface. I was headed to a spot where we'd gotten reports of smuggling activity. Nothing major, just some guys running untaxed cigarettes up from Mexico, maybe some marijuana. Small-time stuff, but it was my job to check it out. That's when I saw the fog. It wasn't like normal fog. Normal fog rolls in gradually, builds up over time. This fog was a wall, a solid wall of white stretching across the channel so thick I couldn't see 3 feet into it. It looked wrong, too dense, too still. Normal fog moves with the wind, shifts and swirls. This fog hung in place like a curtain. I idled the boat and stared at it. The air temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees. I could see my breath. In September, in Louisiana. I should have turned around. Boudreaux's warning was echoing in my head. But I was a cop, and cops don't turn around because of fog. And somewhere beyond that wall of white, there were smugglers who thought they were safe. I reached for my radio. This is Unit 7 to dispatch. I'm at the southern end of Bayou de Famille, coordinates. I glanced at my GPS and rattled off the numbers. I've encountered heavy fog, going to proceed with caution and investigate reports of smuggling activity. Copy that, Unit 7. Be advised, Weather Service shows no fog in your area. I looked at the wall of white blocking the channel. Tell them to update their instruments. I'm looking right at it. Copy. Stay in radio contact. Will do. Unit 7 out. I eased the boat forward, into the fog. The world disappeared. I'd been in fog before, plenty of times, but this was different. This was absolute. The white was so thick I couldn't see the bow of my own boat. Sound was muffled, deadened, like someone had thrown a blanket over the world. Even the throb of the engine seemed distant, muted. I cut the throttle to idle and moved forward slowly, one hand on the wheel, the other reaching out into the whiteness as if I could feel my way through it. The GPS screen flickered, the numbers scrambling and jumping. The radio hissed with static. Then, suddenly, I felt it. A change in the air, in the water, in reality itself. Like passing through a membrane, like stepping from one room into another. There was a moment of resistance, of pressure, and then I was through. The fog cleared, but what I saw on the other side made no sense at all. The bayou was gone. Or rather, it was different. The channels were wider, deeper. The vegetation was thicker, wilder, untouched by modern management. The cypress trees were even more massive, and there were no power lines, no channel markers, no signs of the 21st century anywhere. And there, anchored in the wider water ahead of me, were ships. Tall ships. Wooden sailing ships with masts and rigging, flying flags I didn't recognize. A dozen of them, maybe more, spread across what looked like a natural harbor. And between them, smaller boats moved back and forth, loading cargo, transferring supplies. I cut my engine, and the sudden silence was broken only by the sound of wind and canvas sails and the distant shouts of men working. Real men, dozens of them, moving on the decks of those ships, climbing rigging, hauling ropes. This wasn't a historical reenactment. This wasn't some festival or movie set. The ships showed wear, real wear. The men wore clothes that weren't costumes but actual working garments from another century, and the smell, tar and salt and unwashed bodies and wood smoke, was absolutely real. I was looking at Jean Lafitte's pirate fleet, and they were looking at me. A voice shouted from the nearest ship, harsh and commanding. "Qu'est-ce que c'est? What manner of vessel?" Men were pointing at my patrol boat, at the fiberglass hull, the outboard motor, the modern equipment. Some were reaching for weapons, pistols, cutlasses, muskets. I raised my hands, showing I was unarmed, or at least that my hands were empty. My service weapon was still on my belt, but I had a feeling if I reached for it, I'd have a dozen musket balls in me before I could draw. A smaller boat was being lowered from the ship, 4 men rowing toward me with practiced efficiency. They circled my boat, staring at it with expressions of confusion and suspicion. One of them, an older man with a sun-darkened face and a scar running from his eye to his jaw, called up to me. "You speak English?" "Yes." "Yes, I speak English." "French?" "Un peu, a little." "Who are you? What flag you sail under?" I tried to think of an answer that wouldn't get me killed. "My name is Antoine Doucet. I'm a law officer, Port Authority. I'm not looking for trouble. I gestured helplessly at the fog behind me. I got lost in the fog. The men exchanged glances. One of them muttered something that sounded like a prayer. The scarred man studied me with sharp, calculating eyes. "Lost in the fog," he repeated. "Yes, that happens here sometimes. Come aboard. The captain will want to speak with you." I should get back. "You cross the fog line, friend. There is no getting back until it lets you. Come, now." It wasn't a request. 2 of the men climbed into my boat, and before I could protest, they'd tied a line to it and were towing it toward the ship. I had no choice but to follow. The ship was massive up close, a 3-masted schooner with gun ports along her sides. As I climbed the rope ladder to the deck, I could see the name painted on her hull, La Damnation. The crew gathered around as I came aboard, maybe 40 men, all watching me with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. They were a rough-looking bunch, scars and missing teeth common, clothing patched and worn. But their weapons were well maintained, and they moved with the confidence of men who knew how to fight. The scarred man led me toward the stern, where a cabin door stood open. He knocked, then gestured for me to enter. The cabin was surprisingly luxurious. Dark wood paneling, brass fixtures, maps spread across a large table. And standing at the table, studying those maps by lamplight, was a man I recognized from history books and paintings. He was maybe 40, with dark hair tied back in a queue, a neatly trimmed beard, and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a fine coat, well cut despite the worn patches, and there was a sword at his hip that looked like it had seen plenty of use. Jean Lafitte. He looked up as I entered, and his eyes widened slightly at my appearance, my uniform, my badge, the modern materials of my clothing. "Well," he said in perfect English with a French accent, "this is certainly unexpected." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. Pierre, fetch our guest some rum." "I don't drink on duty," I said automatically. Lafitte smiled. "You're not on duty here, friend. You're not anywhere officially. You're in the between place, the fold-in time. And here I recommend rum." He poured 2 glasses from a bottle on his desk and handed one to me. "Drink. You'll need it when I explain what's happened to you." I took the glass. My hands were shaking. I took a sip. It was strong, harsh, but it helped steady my nerves. Lafitte sat across from me, studying me with those sharp eyes. "You crossed the fog line. How much do you know about it?" "Nothing. I mean, I'd heard stories, but stories are all that's left on your side. On this side, it's simply a fact of life. The fog line appears here, in this place, at this time. Always the same place, always the same time. And sometimes it lets people through. From your time to mine, from mine to yours. What year is this? 1814. October of 1814, to be precise. We're preparing for war. The British are coming, and we must decide whether to fight with them or against them. He paused. But that's not your concern. Your concern is getting back to your time. Can I? Perhaps. The fog line is temperamental. It opens and closes according to rules I don't fully understand. But there is always a cost for crossing. What kind of cost? Lafitte's expression grew somber. The fog takes memory. Each time you cross, you lose something. A memory, a piece of your past. Small things at first. A childhood friend's name, the face of a teacher. But with each crossing, the price grows steeper. I've crossed many times over the years trying to understand it, trying to escape it, and I've lost much. How long have you been dealing with this? Since 1815, the Battle of New Orleans. That's when it started, when the fog line was born. Something about all that death, all that violence in this place. It tore open a wound in time, and I've been caught in it ever since. I stared at him, but you'd be over 200 years old. In your time, yes, but I don't live in your time. I live here in 1814, in this moment that repeats endlessly. The fog line keeps me young, keeps this whole place suspended, and occasionally it lets travelers through, like you. I need to get back. My family will be fine. Time passes the same on both sides. You've been here perhaps 20 minutes. That means 20 minutes have passed in 1998 as well. When you return, if you return, it will be as if you were simply lost in the fog for a few minutes. If? He stood and walked to the cabin window, looking out at the fog bank visible in the distance. The fog decides who crosses and who doesn't. The best I can tell you is this. Approach the fog with clear intent. Think of home, of your time, of what you're returning to. And cross quickly before the fog changes its mind. And the memory I'll lose? You won't know until you're back. It's not like losing a tooth where you can feel the gap. The memory simply wasn't. Like it never happened. Others may remember it, but you won't. That's the truly insidious part. You won't even know what you've lost. I stood, my legs unsteady. Thank you for the warning. I need to try. Of course. Lafitte walked me to the door, then paused. One more thing. The smugglers you were looking for, they're still operating in your time. But some of them know about the fog line. They use it to hide their goods, to move between eras. If you continue investigating, you'll cross the fog again, and each time the price will be higher. I'll take my chances. He smiled sadly. Everyone says that. Pierre, escort our guest back to his vessel. The scarred man, Pierre, led me back to my boat. The crew watched in silence as I climbed down and started the engine. Pierre untied the line and tossed it into my boat. Fair winds, Officer Doucet. And remember, the fog always takes its due. I pointed my boat toward the fog wall and throttled up. As I approached, I thought of Celeste and Marie, of my house, of 1998. I thought of everything I was returning to. Then I hit the fog. The resistance was stronger this time, like pushing through thick honey. The world went white and cold. My ears popped, my vision blurred, and then I was through. The modern bayou surrounded me. Power lines overhead, channel markers, the distant sound of a helicopter. I was back. I checked my watch. 23 minutes had passed since I'd entered the fog. I grabbed my radio. Unit 7 to dispatch. Go ahead, Unit 7. We were getting worried. You dropped off radio for about 20 minutes. Sorry. The fog was thicker than I thought. I'm clear now, heading back to station. Copy that. Any sign of the smugglers? Negative. I'll file a report when I get back. I turned the boat around and started the long trip back to Jean Lafitte. My hands were still shaking, my mind trying to process what I'd seen. Jean Lafitte, 1814. Pirate ships. The fog line. It was impossible, but it had happened. When I got back to the station, I filed a report about heavy fog and no sighting of smugglers. I didn't mention time travel or pirates. I wasn't crazy. I drove home that evening in a daze. Celeste was already there, making dinner. Marie was at the table doing homework. "How was your day?" Celeste asked. "Quiet. Just routine patrol." She kissed me. Everything seemed normal. The house, my family, my life. All exactly as I'd left it that morning. It was only later, lying in bed beside Celeste, that I realized something was wrong. I was trying to remember the name of my best friend from high school. We'd been inseparable senior year, played basketball together, double-dated to prom. I could see his face, hear his laugh. But his name, it was gone, just completely gone, like it had never existed. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. I went to my high school yearbook, pulled it off the shelf, flipped through the pages. There I was. There were my friends. But one of them, the one I should have known, the one whose name I couldn't remember, his face was blurred in every photo, like someone had smudged it with a wet thumb. And in the group photos where I knew he'd been standing next to me, there was just empty space. The fog had taken its due. And I realized with cold certainty that this was just the beginning. Because somewhere out there in the bayou, smugglers were using the fog line. And my job was to stop them, which meant I'd have to cross again, and again. And each time, I'd lose a little more of myself. I looked at Celeste sleeping beside me, at the photo of Marie on my nightstand. How many crossings until I forgot them? How many until they forgot me? I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there listening to the sound of my wife breathing, trying to memorize every detail of our life together. Before the fog took it all away. I spent 2 weeks trying to convince myself it had been a hallucination. Heat stroke, maybe. Or carbon monoxide from the boat engine. Something rational, something that made sense in the world I knew. But the blank spaces in my yearbook didn't lie, and the confusion on people's faces when I asked about my friend from high school told me everything I needed to know. They'd all forgotten him too, because he'd never existed. Not anymore. Celeste noticed I wasn't sleeping. "You've been having nightmares," she said one morning, watching me stare into my coffee. "Want to talk about it?" "Just work stress," I lied. "Antoine." She took my hand across the kitchen table. "We've been married 10 years. I know when something's wrong." 10 years. I remembered our wedding, the little church in Thibodaux, the reception at her parents' house. I remembered our honeymoon in Galveston, remembered the night Marie was conceived. All of it crystal clear. For now. "I'm fine," I said, "just tired." Marie ran into the kitchen, backpack bouncing. "Dad, you're taking me to school today, right?" "Of course, ma petite." In the car, she chattered about her day ahead, about her friend Ashley's birthday party on Saturday, about the book report due next week. I held on to every word, every detail, terrified that one morning I'd wake up and not remember any of it. At the station, Trey was waiting with coffee and bad news. "We got another tip on the smugglers," he said. "Different location, but same general area. Bayou Rigaud, South End." I knew exactly where that was, less than 2 miles from where I'd found the fog line. Who's the tip from? Anonymous. Called it in last night. Said they saw boats moving at night, lights where there shouldn't be lights. Could be legitimate fishermen. Could be. But DEA thinks the smuggling ring is bigger than we thought. Not just cigarettes and weed. They're talking cocaine, maybe heroin, moving it up from Mexico through the Gulf using the bayou as a highway. Which meant I couldn't ignore it. This wasn't small time anymore. This was serious trafficking, the kind that destroyed communities. I'll check it out this afternoon, I said. Want company? I almost said yes. Having Trey there would mean I couldn't cross the fog line, couldn't investigate what I suspected was happening. But it also meant putting him at risk of something I barely understood. No, it's fine. Probably nothing anyway. That afternoon, I headed back into the bayou alone. The October sun was warm, the water calm. Egrets stood in the shallows, and a gar surfaced near my boat, its prehistoric snout breaking the surface before disappearing back into the dark water. I followed Bayou Rigaud south, watching my GPS, watching for the fog. And sure enough, about a mile from where I'd crossed before, I saw it. The same wall of white, the same unnatural stillness. But this time, I also saw something else. Footprints in the mud of a small island near the fog. Fresh footprints, less than a day old. And tire tracks from something small, maybe an ATV or a dirt bike. Someone else knew about the fog. Someone was using it. I beached my boat and examined the tracks more closely. They led to the water's edge, right to where the fog began. And in the mud, I found something else, a cigarette butt. American brand, but Mexican tax stamp. The smugglers were crossing. They'd found the fog line and figured out how to use it. I stood at the edge of the fog, weighing my options. I could call it in, bring more officers out here. But how would I explain what I'd seen last time? And if the smugglers were moving product through time, conventional law enforcement wouldn't be able to stop them. I thought about Lafitte's warning. Each crossing has a cost. Each time, I'd lose something. But if I didn't stop these smugglers, how many kids would die from the drugs they were moving? How many families would be destroyed? I thought of Celeste, of Marie. I memorized their faces one more time. Then I walked into the fog. The crossing was easier this time, like my body remembered the path. The resistance lasted only a moment, and then I was through. 1814 again. But different. It was daytime now, and the pirate fleet was active. Boats moving between ships, men working, the sound of hammers and saws from a shipyard I could see on a distant shore. And near the fog line, beached on the same island where I'd seen the tracks, were two modern boats, flat-bottomed aluminum john boats, the kind poachers and smugglers favored. And standing beside them, 3 men loading wooden crates onto the boats. I recognized one of them, Tommy Guidry, a local burnout I'd arrested twice for possession. The other 2 I didn't know, but they had the look of professional criminals, alert, armed, dangerous. They saw me at the same moment I saw them. "Shit! Cop!" Tommy grabbed for his pistol. "Don't move! Louisiana Port Authority!" I had my service weapon out, trained on them. For a frozen moment, we all just stared at each other across a gap of 184 years. Then Tommy fired. The shot went wide, but it broke the spell. I dove behind a cypress trunk as bullets chewed into the wood. Return fire, keep them pinned, wait for backup. Except there was no backup. Not here, not in 1814. I heard shouting from the pirate ships. Men were launching boats, rowing toward the commotion. Whether they'd help me or join the shooting, I had no idea. One of the smugglers, a big guy with a shaved head, made a run for his boat. I shot out his outboard motor. He sprawled in the mud, cursing. "Give it up," I shouted. "There's nowhere to run." "Fuck you, cop." Tommy fired again, closer this time. Then a musket boomed, and Tommy went down hard. I turned to see Pierre, Lafitte's scarred lieutenant, reloading his weapon. Behind him, a dozen pirates were beaching their boats, all armed. The other smuggler, younger, maybe 20, threw down his gun and raised his hands. "I surrender. Don't shoot." Pierre walked over to Tommy, who was clutching his leg and screaming. The musket ball had shattered his femur. Pierre looked at me. "Friend of yours?" "Criminal, smuggler." "Ah, we're familiar with that profession." He gestured at his men. "Take them, and secure those boats." Within minutes, the 3 smugglers were tied up, and their boats searched. The crates contained cocaine, dozens of kilos, probably worth millions in 1998. In 1814, they were just mysterious white powder. Pierre tasted a bit on his finger and spat. "What is this?" "Poison, a drug, very dangerous. And these men move it between times, using the fog? Looks that way. Captain Lafitte will want to speak with you again. Come." This time, Law Damnation was ready for battle. Cannons were being loaded, small arms distributed. I could see men working in the rigging, preparing the sails. Lafitte met me on deck, looking grimmer than last time. "Officer Doucet, you've returned quickly and brought trouble with you. These men are criminals in my time. They're using the fog line to smuggle drugs. I understand. And I'm afraid I must tell you something that will complicate matters further." He led me to his cabin, away from the crew. "The British are coming. Not just ships, an army. They mean to take New Orleans, control the Mississippi, split America in 2. The battle will happen here in these waters soon, within weeks." I remembered my history. January 8th, 1815, the Battle of New Orleans. Andrew Jackson, Jean Lafitte helping the Americans, a crushing American victory that made Jackson a hero. "You're going to help the Americans," I said. "Yes, but Officer Doucet, that battle is what created the fog line. All that death, all that violence, it will tear open the wound in time that you've been crossing through. When that battle happens, the fog line will become permanent. More people will be able to cross, and if these smugglers continue to use it, the timeline gets contaminated. Modern drugs in 1814, modern weapons, everything changes." "Precisely. So you have a choice. You can take your prisoners back to your time and let the proper authorities handle them, but more smugglers will come because the fog line will keep opening. Or you help me close it. When the battle happens, when the wound opens, there will be a moment, just a moment, when it can be sealed. But it requires someone from the other side, someone from your time, to anchor it shut. Someone who understands both eras." "What happens to that person?" Lafitte's expression told me everything. "They become the guardian, the keeper of the boundary, neither fully in one time nor the other, but between, forever." I thought about what he was asking. Give up my life, my family, my existence to become a temporal guard. Stand watch between centuries, making sure they never bled into each other. I can't. I have a daughter, a wife. I know. And I'm not asking you to decide now, but know this. Every time you cross, you lose memory. And those memories don't just disappear. They go into the fog. The fog collects them, feeds on them. That's how it survives, how it grows. The more people cross, the more memory it takes, the stronger it becomes. Jesus Christ. Indeed. So think carefully before you cross again. Each time you pay a price, and eventually the price will be everything. Pierre brought the prisoners aboard. Tommy was pale from blood loss but alive. The other 2 looked terrified, surrounded by real pirates with real weapons. "What about them?" I asked. "Take them back. They're your jurisdiction. We have a battle to prepare for." I loaded the smugglers into my boat, their hands still bound. The pirates had confiscated their weapons but left the boats intact. As I prepared to leave, Lafitte came to the railing. "Officer Doucet, one more thing. You're about to cross for the second time. The memory you lose will be more significant than before. Hold on to what matters most." I started my engine and headed for the fog. Behind me, I could hear Tommy and his accomplices arguing, panicking, but I tuned them out. I was thinking about Celeste, about Marie, about my mother, my friends, everything that made me who I was. The fog resisted more this time. It didn't want to let me through. I felt pressure, cold, a sensation like drowning. My ears popped painfully. My vision went dark. Then I was through. The modern bayou surrounded us. The smugglers were still in the boat, now completely disoriented. I grabbed my radio. "Unit 7 to dispatch, I have 3 suspects in custody. Requesting backup at my location for transport." Within an hour, the bayou was full of law enforcement. DEA, Louisiana State Police, sheriff's deputies. The smugglers were taken away, the cocaine seized. It was the biggest drug bust in parish history. My captain, Raymond Hebert, pulled me aside. "Hell of a job, Antoine. How'd you track them down?" "Got lucky, followed up on the tip, found them moving product. They kept talking about pirates and fog and time travel. DEA thinks they're high on their own supply." "Probably." That night, I drove home exhausted. Celeste was waiting, dinner on the table. Marie was doing homework. "Sorry I'm late." "It's okay. I heard about the drug bust on the news. They said you made the arrests." "Yeah, big day." We ate dinner, talked about Marie's day at school, about Celeste's shift at the hospital. Everything normal, everything perfect. It was only when I was putting Marie to bed that I noticed something wrong. "Dad, can you tell me the story about how you and Mom met?" It was one of her favorite bedtime stories. How I'd met Celeste at a Mardi Gras parade, how I'd caught the beads she'd thrown, how we'd talked for hours, how I'd known right then she was the one. I opened my mouth to start the story, and realized I couldn't remember it. I remembered meeting Celeste. I remembered our early dates, our engagement, our wedding. But that first meeting, that moment when I'd known I'd met the woman I'd marry, gone. "Dad? I'm tired, sweetheart. Let's do a different story tonight." After she fell asleep, I went to the living room where Celeste was reading. "Hey, tell me again how we met?" She looked up, surprised. "At my cousin Rebecca's wedding. You were friends with the groom. We danced, you asked for my number, we went out the next week." "Why?" That wasn't what I remembered, or what I'd remembered before. "No reason. Just wanted to hear you tell it." But inside I was falling apart. The fog had taken it. That beautiful memory of our first meeting. The one Marie loved to hear. The one that had anchored our whole relationship. It was gone, and in its place was a different memory, one that didn't feel quite as special, quite as magical. I went to bed that night holding Celeste, tears on my face that I couldn't explain to her. 2 crossings, 2 memories lost, and somewhere in the bayou, the fog was waiting for me to cross again. Because the smugglers were just the beginning. Lafitte had warned me. More would come. And each time I tried to stop them, I'd have to cross. And each time I crossed, I'd lose another piece of myself. How many pieces did I have left? How many until there was nothing left of Antoine Doucet at all? I didn't sleep. I just held my wife and tried to memorize the feeling of her breathing beside me, the warmth of her body, the scent of her hair. Because I knew, with cold certainty, that one day I'd forget this too. The fog would take it all, piece by piece, memory by memory, until I was just an empty shell, walking through a life I no longer remembered living. And the worst part, I'd keep crossing anyway. Because that's what cops do. We protect people, even when it costs us everything. Even when it costs us ourselves. 3 more times I crossed the fog line over the next 2 months. 3 more smuggling busts, 3 more arrests. The DEA called me a hero. The newspapers ran stories about the cop who'd single-handedly dismantled a major trafficking operation. There was talk of a governor's commendation, maybe even a promotion to lieutenant. My captain shook my hand at a press conference, said I was making the whole department proud. But I was dying inside, one memory at a time. The bayou in November smells different than any other time of year. The humidity drops just enough that you can breathe without feeling like you're drowning, but it's still thick, still heavy with the scent of decay and growth happening simultaneously. The cypress trees start to turn, their needles going rust-colored before they fall into the dark water. Alligators get sluggish, preparing for winter, and the birds migrate south in great formations that darken the sky. I noticed all of this with a clarity that felt wrong, like my brain was compensating for what it was losing by sharpening what remained. I could tell you the exact shade of green on a particular clump of Spanish moss, could identify a bird by the sound of its wings cutting through the humid air. But I was starting to forget the things that mattered. The third crossing happened on a Tuesday morning in late October. The air was so thick you could see it. Heat shimmer rising off the water even though it was barely 60 degrees. I'd gotten a tip from an informant, a guy named Remy, who ran a bait shop down in Port Sulphur. He said he'd seen a boat moving through Bayou Lafourche at 3 in the morning, no running lights, heading south toward what he called that dead zone where the fog lives. Even the locals knew about it now. Word was spreading, the way things do in small communities. La ligne de brouillard. The fog line. People were starting to avoid that section of the bayou altogether, said it felt wrong, said their instruments went haywire. Some of the old-timers claimed they'd seen things in the fog, figures that didn't belong, heard voices speaking French that was too old, too formal. I caught the smugglers just as they were crossing, 2 men in a bass boat, the kind with a big outboard motor meant for racing across shallow water. They had 50 pounds of cocaine wrapped in waterproof bags, along with some heroin and what looked like experimental designer drugs I didn't even recognize. When they saw my patrol boat, they didn't stop. They just gunned it straight into the fog wall. I followed without hesitation. That should have told me something about how far gone I already was. A month ago, I would have called for backup, would have set up a perimeter, would have done it by the book. But now, I just followed them into the white. The crossing was becoming routine, which should have terrified me more than it did. The resistance as you pushed through the barrier, that feeling like you were forcing yourself through a membrane made of something thicker than air, but thinner than water. The cold that hit you like a physical blow, dropping the temperature 30 degrees in an instant. The moment of absolute whiteness where you couldn't see, couldn't hear, could barely breathe. And then the pop, the release, and you were through. I was getting used to it, like a junkie getting used to the needle, barely feeling the prick anymore. On the other side, 1814 was in late autumn too. The physics of it still made no sense to me, how the seasons matched up across a gap of 184 years. But they did. The air had that same thick quality, but cleaner somehow, untouched by centuries of industrial pollution and chemical runoff. You could smell the pure swamp, the decay and life mixing together the way they had for thousands of years before humans came and complicated everything. The smuggler's boat had died, the engine cutting out the moment they fully crossed. Modern engines didn't work well in the past. Something about the temporal displacement affecting the electrical systems. Fuel injection, computerized ignition, all of it useless in 1814. The two men were trying to paddle back to the fog using their hands, panic clear on their faces even from a distance. They didn't make it. Lafitte's men surrounded them, rowing out from the hidden harbor in longboats that moved silent and fast through the water. This time, Pierre didn't even bother with muskets. He just drew his cutlass and smiled, that expression of professional violence that said he'd done this 1,000 times before. "You boys don't learn, do you?" The arrest was quick, efficient. The pirates were getting good at dealing with time-lost smugglers. They confiscated the drugs, though they had no idea what they were really looking at, tied up the prisoners, and delivered them to me like a package. "Captain says to tell you the fee is rising," Pierre said as I loaded the smugglers into my boat. "Every crossing makes the fog stronger. Every crossing makes it harder to control. Soon, it won't matter if anyone seals it or not. It'll be too strong to seal. How long do we have?" He looked at the fog, that wall of impossible white. "Captain thinks maybe 2 more months. The battle is coming. December 23rd, they'll start the skirmishes. Then January 8th, the big one. When that happens, either the fog gets sealed or it tears open forever. No middle ground." I took the smugglers back across. The crossing back took something from me that I didn't realize was gone until 3 days later. I was at the station, filling out paperwork in the cramped office I shared with Trey. The air conditioning was broken again, and a fan pushed humid air around without cooling anything. Coffee gone cold in a styrofoam cup. The smell of old reports and printer toner. My captain, Raymond Hebert, stuck his head in. "Antoine, how's your old man doing? Haven't seen him at the crawfish boil this year. He's still giving you grief about staying in Louisiana instead of taking that job in Houston." I opened my mouth to say that Dad had died 2 years ago. Heart attack, sudden in his sleep. I'd spoken at the funeral, except I couldn't remember the funeral. I remembered the phone call from Mama, 3 in the morning, her voice breaking as she tried to tell me. Remembered the drive to their house, the way the streets were empty and the streetlights made everything look unreal. Remembered the grief, the numbness, the feeling of the world tilting sideways. Remembered standing in the cemetery, St. Louis No. 3, the above-ground tombs white in the sun. But the actual service, the casket, the people who'd come, what I'd said in my eulogy. Nothing. Just a blank space where the memory should have been. "He's fine," I heard myself say. "Just been busy." Raymond nodded and left. I sat there, staring at my paperwork, my hands starting to shake. My father was dead. I knew that. But I'd just told my captain he was alive. Why had I said that? Because I couldn't remember the funeral, couldn't remember the concrete proof of his death, so some part of my brain had just filled in the blank with the simplest answer. "He's fine." I went to the bathroom and threw up. The 4th crossing came a week later. Another tip, another chase, another group of smugglers who'd figured out how to use the fog to move product between centuries. This time it was weapons, modern assault rifles that would be devastating in the hands of pirates or British soldiers. I caught them, made the arrest, brought them back, and lost my college graduation. 4 years of my life at LSU, all the work and stress and late-night studying, distilled down to a diploma on the wall and no memory of actually earning it. I knew I'd gone to college. I could tell you my major, criminal justice, with a minor in French. Could name my professors, at least some of them. But walking across that stage, throwing my cap, the party afterward, gone. I started keeping a journal, writing down everything I could remember at the end of each day. Names, dates, events, trying to create an external record of my life before the fog took all of it. The journal filled up fast, pages and pages of increasingly desperate handwriting. Today, Marie asked me about the time we went to the aquarium and I couldn't remember which aquarium she meant. Celeste said we'd gone to the one in New Orleans for Marie's 6th birthday. I don't remember that. I remember other birthdays, but not that one. Marie cried, said I was forgetting all the good times. She's right. Celeste noticed I was deteriorating. How could she not? I was losing weight because I kept forgetting to eat. I wasn't sleeping more than a couple of hours a night, terrified that if I slept I'd wake up missing something else. I'd forget conversations we'd had the day before, would repeat myself, would stare at her sometimes like I was trying to memorize her face. "Antoine," she said one night, watching me at the kitchen table with my journal, "you need to see a doctor. This isn't normal. This is like early onset Alzheimer's or something. We need to get you checked out." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You looked at Marie yesterday like you didn't recognize her. She saw it. She asked me if you still loved her." That hit me like a physical blow. Of course I love her. She's my daughter. I know that, and you know that. But do you feel it? I opened my mouth to say yes, of course I felt it. But the truth was more complicated. I looked at Marie, and I knew she was my daughter. I knew I was supposed to love her, but the feeling, that deep parental bond, was getting thinner. Like watching it happen to someone else instead of experiencing it myself. "I'll take some time off," I said. "Rest. Get my head straight." "Promise? Promise?" But the next day, there was another tip. And this time, the witnesses said they'd seen something impossible. Old wooden ships alongside modern boats. Pirates trading with smugglers. The fog line was getting worse, the barrier between times thinning to the point where both eras could see each other. I had to go back. Celeste watched me pack my gear for patrol, her face tight with worry and something else. Fear. Not of the bayou or smugglers. Fear of me, of what I was becoming. "You promised you'd take time off. After this. One more case. There's always one more case, Antoine. There's always one more reason you have to go out there. But when are you going to choose us? When are you going to choose your family over your job?" I kissed her forehead, and even that felt mechanical, like I was going through the motions of being a husband without really understanding why. "I love you. You know that, right?" "I know. But knowing and feeling are different things. You know you love us, but I don't think you can feel it anymore, and that's what scares me." She had no idea how true that was. How I'd wake up next to her and have to remind myself who she was, what she meant to me. How I'd look at the wedding photos on our bedroom wall and feel nothing. Just see two strangers in formal clothes. The bayou was quiet that morning, eerily so. Too quiet. Even the birds seemed to have fled, and the usual sounds of the swamp, the gators bellowing and the fish jumping and the insects singing their endless chorus, were muted. The water was smooth as glass, reflecting the gray sky like a mirror. Spanish moss hung motionless from the cypress trees. When I reached the fog line, it was different. Thicker, darker, pulsing like it was alive. Like it had a heartbeat. And waiting just inside it, barely visible through the white, was a boat. Lafitte's boat. I crossed, and the transition felt wrong. The resistance was stronger, the cold deeper, the moment of whiteness longer. When I came through, I was gasping, my lungs burning like I'd been holding my breath. Lafitte was standing at the bow, and he looked more tired than I'd ever seen him. His clothes were worn, patches on patches, and his face was lined with exhaustion that went bone deep. But his eyes were still sharp, still intelligent, still seeing too much. "You keep coming back," he said without preamble, "even knowing the cost. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Officer Doucet. You're choosing duty over memory, present over past. The question is whether it's worth it. Whether stopping these smugglers is worth losing everything that makes you who you are. I thought about Marie's face, the confusion and hurt when I'd looked at her like a stranger. I don't know anymore. Come, I want to show you something. He had his men row us to shore, to a part of the bayou I'd never been to before. Deeper in, where the cypress trees grew so thick they blocked out the sky and the water was black as ink. The air was cooler here, and everything was covered in a fine mist that wasn't quite fog, but wasn't quite normal moisture either. A clearing in the swamp, where the fog hung thick and still, moving in slow swirls like it was breathing. And in the center of the clearing, arranged like a museum exhibit, were dozens of objects. Hundreds, maybe. Photos, letters, clothing, children's toys, jewelry, books, all of them translucent, ghostly, not quite real. They floated an inch above the ground, suspended in the misty air. What is this? The fog's collection, every memory it takes, every piece of identity it steals, it keeps here. Look closely. I walked among the objects, my boots squelching in the wet ground. The things floated around me like jellyfish in an aquarium, drifting on currents I couldn't feel. And then I started recognizing them. My high school yearbook, the pages where my friend's face had been blurred out, a photo of Celeste and me at Mardi Gras, confetti in our hair, both of us laughing. The one I knew existed but couldn't remember being taken. My father's funeral program, St. Benedict Catholic Church, his name in elegant script, my college diploma, the actual one I'd held on graduation day before framing it. And there, heartbreakingly, impossibly, a hospital bracelet. Tiny, infant-sized. Baby girl Doucet printed on it in faded ink, Marie's bracelet from when she was born. And next to it, a footprint card, her tiny foot pressed in ink, the ridges of her toes visible. It keeps them? I whispered. The fog doesn't destroy memories, Lafitte said, standing behind me. It collects them, feeds on them, preserves them in this place between times, and the more it takes, the more solid it becomes, the more it bleeds into both eras. I reached for Marie's bracelet, desperate to touch it, to reconnect with that lost memory, but my hand passed through it like smoke. The bracelet didn't even ripple. You can't take them back, Lafitte said quietly. Once given to the fog, they belong to it. They exist here, in the between place, but they're no longer part of you. But I wanted you to see, to understand what you're sacrificing with each crossing. Why? My voice was rough. Why are you helping me? You're a pirate, a criminal. Why do you care what happens to me? He was quiet for a long moment, looking at the floating memories. Because I've been where you are, made the same choices, lost the same things, and I want you to understand something before it's too late. Before you cross the point where you can't turn back. He turned to face me fully, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Regret. Deep, profound regret. The battle is coming, December 23rd. The first skirmishes, British advance forces trying to find a way through the bayou to New Orleans. January 8th, the main assault. Jackson's forces against Pakenham's army. It will be the bloodiest day this region has ever seen. Over 2,000 men will die in less than 30 minutes. I knew the history. The Battle of New Orleans, fought after the peace treaty was already signed. A pointless battle that made Andrew Jackson a national hero. When that happens, Lafitte continued, the fog line will tear wide open. All that death, all that violence, all that pain, concentrated in one place at one time, it will rip the wound between times so wide that both eras will start bleeding into each other. Soldiers from 1815 seeing tourists from your time. Modern boats appearing in the middle of naval battles. The timelines will collapse into each other. And someone needs to seal it. Someone who understands both times. Someone who exists in both eras. Someone willing to give up everything to stand guard at the boundary forever. You want me to sacrifice everything. My family, my life, my very existence. I want you to choose, he said firmly. Sacrifice everything to seal the fog and save both timelines, or keep crossing until there's nothing left of you anyway. Those are your only options now. You've crossed too many times. The fog owns too much of you. There's no going back to who you were before this started. That's not a choice. That's just two different ways of dying. No, it's a tragedy. But it's the tragedy you've written for yourself, one crossing at a time. And I'm sorry for that. Truly. I looked at the floating memories, at the pieces of my life suspended in the mist. Is there any of the original Jean Lafitte left? Or are you just the fog wearing his face? He smiled, sad and knowing. I don't know anymore. I've lost too much to remember who I was. Maybe I'm just a ghost playing at being alive. But I'm aware enough to know what's happening to you, and to warn you while you can still understand the warning. I left him there and returned to my boat, my mind reeling. The crossing back felt like swimming through mud, resistance and cold and pressure that made my bones ache. He was right, I could feel it. Even now, trying to remember Celeste's face, there was a lag, a delay, like accessing a file that was corrupted and needed time to load. I was losing myself, and I didn't know how to stop it. When I crossed back to 1998, I'd been gone for 6 hours. Celeste had called the station, frantic. Trey had organized a search party. They'd found my patrol boat empty, drifting near the fog line, and assumed I'd fallen overboard. "Where the hell were you?" Trey demanded when I called in on the radio. Got turned around in the fog. Engine died, had to fix it. For 6 hours? I had no answer that would make sense. When I got back to the station, there was an ambulance waiting. Celeste had insisted, and Raymond had agreed. They wanted me checked out. Make sure I hadn't hit my head or suffered from exposure. The paramedic shined a light in my eyes, asked me basic questions. Date, current president, my address. I answered them all correctly and he cleared me. But Celeste wasn't satisfied. "Something's wrong with him," she told Raymond. "He's not himself. He needs to see a neurologist, get brain scans." "Celeste, I'm fine." "You're not fine." Her voice cracked, tears starting. "You called Marie by the wrong name this morning. You forgot our anniversary. You look at me sometimes like you're trying to remember who I am. That's not fine, Antoine. That's not normal." Raymond pulled me aside. "Take a week off, mandatory. Doctor's orders. Get yourself checked out. Spend time with your family. The smugglers can wait. But that's an order, Officer Doucet." So I went home. Spent a week trying to be a normal husband and father. Took Marie to school, picked her up, helped her with homework. Had dinner with Celeste every night. Went to bed beside her like a normal married couple. But it felt like watching someone else's life. Like I was an actor playing the role of Antoine Doucet, hitting all the right marks but not understanding the character's motivation. Marie noticed. Kids always do. "Dad?" she asked one night as I tucked her in. "Do you still love me?" "Of course I do, sweetheart. You're my daughter." "I know I'm your daughter. But do you love me? Like, do you feel it in your heart?" I opened my mouth to say yes, of course I did. But she was looking at me with those dark eyes, Celeste's eyes, and I couldn't lie to her. "I'm trying to," I whispered. "I'm trying so hard to feel what I'm supposed to feel. But something's wrong with me, and I don't know how to fix it." She started crying. "I want my real dad back." That night, lying in bed, Celeste turned to me in the darkness. "Antoine, do you still love me?" "Of course." "Then why does it feel like you're already gone? Like you're just going through the motions of being my husband?" I didn't answer. Because she was right, I was already gone. The fog had taken too much. There wasn't enough left to come back from. The next morning, I drove back to the bayou alone, before sunrise, before anyone could stop me. I needed to end this, one way or another. The fog was waiting, pulsing in the pre-dawn darkness like a living thing. I crossed for the 6th time on December 22nd, 1998. And this time, I knew I wouldn't be coming back. I crossed for the 6th time on December 22nd, 1998. The sun wasn't up yet, just a pale hint of gray on the eastern horizon. The bayou was silent in that way it only is before dawn, when even the night creatures have gone to sleep and the day creatures haven't woken yet. The water was perfectly still, black as oil, reflecting nothing. Mist rose from its surface in lazy spirals, and somewhere in the distance, a barred owl called out its distinctive "Who cooks for you?" I'd stopped counting the memories I'd lost, or maybe I couldn't count them anymore, couldn't remember what I'd forgotten. It was like trying to catalog empty spaces, trying to make a list of things that no longer existed. My wedding ceremony. Gone. I knew I'd married Celeste, could see the ring on my finger, but the actual day, the vows, the kiss, my hand shaking as I put the ring on her finger, nothing. Just a certificate in a drawer and photographs of strangers in formal wear. My first day as a police officer. The oath I'd taken, the moment they'd pinned the badge on my chest, the pride I must have felt. Gone. My mother's face. I knew she existed. Could tell you her name, Marguerite Doucet. Could tell you she lived on Barataria Boulevard in a house my grandfather built. But her face, I couldn't picture it anymore. When I tried, all I saw was a blur, a smudge where a person should be. And Marie. God, Marie. I'd looked at her yesterday morning before leaving the house. She was eating cereal at the kitchen table, still in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. And I'd felt nothing. I knew she was my daughter. I knew I was supposed to love her more than anything in the world. But it was just information now, just data, like reading facts from a file about someone else's life. I'd said goodbye to Celeste. She was crying, begging me not to go out on the boat, saying she had a bad feeling about it. And I'd kissed her forehead and left anyway, because what else could I do? The fog was calling, pulling me back, and I couldn't resist anymore even if I wanted to. The truth was, I didn't belong in 1998 anymore. Too much of me was already in the fog, in the between place. I was just a shell walking around, pretending to be human. The crossing was harder this time. The fog resisted, or maybe I was resisting, some deep instinct saying that this was it. This was the point of no return. The cold was so intense it felt like my bones were freezing, cracking from the inside out. The pressure made my ears pop and my vision blur. The whiteness lasted forever, and for a moment I thought I was stuck there, trapped in the between place for eternity. Then I was through. 1814, late December. The air was crisp and cold, unusual for Louisiana, but not unheard of. A front had come through, dropping temperatures into the 40s. The pirates were wearing extra layers, wool coats and scarves, and cook fires burned on the decks of the ships. But something was different. The fog was everywhere now, not just in one barrier wall, but hanging over everything in thick streamers. It moved through the pirate encampment like living things, tendrils reaching out, touching people, and every time it did, they'd shiver and look confused, like they'd forgotten what they were doing. The barrier was failing. The two times were bleeding together. Lafitte found me within minutes. He looked worse than last time, if that was possible. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken. He moved like an old man, even though he couldn't be more than 40. "You came back," he said. It wasn't a question. "I had to. You said the battle is in 2 weeks. Closer than that now. British scouts were spotted yesterday morning. Advance forces will be here within days. The battle will start before the new year." He gestured for me to follow him. "Come, there's something you need to see, something that will help you understand what you're about to become." We took a small boat, just the two of us, and rode deep into the fog, deeper than I'd ever gone before. The world disappeared completely. No water, no sky, no sense of up or down. Just endless white and the sound of oars moving through something that might not have been water anymore. And then I saw them, figures in the fog, dozens of them at first, then hundreds. Men, women, children, all walking through the whiteness, all looking lost. They moved slowly, aimlessly, their forms translucent and flickering. Some were dressed in old colonial clothes, some in modern dress. One was wearing what looked like a Confederate uniform. Another wore the rubber suit of a World War II submarine sailor. A woman in a flapper dress from the 1920s. A Spanish conquistador in rusted armor. What are they? "Everyone who ever crossed the fog line and lost too much," Lafitte said quietly. "Their memories, their identities, all taken by the fog until there was nothing left of them in the real world. And when there's nothing left, when even the people who knew you have forgotten you existed, you end up here. Between times. Between existence and non-existence." I stared at the lost souls drifting through the white. Some of them noticed us, turning their blurred faces in our direction. "How long has this been happening?" "Since the first battle here, not the one coming, but earlier, 1699, when Iberville first fought the British in these waters. Every battle, every death in this place, it feeds the wound, makes it deeper, wider. World War II submarines sinking in the Gulf, their crews drowning. Civil War ironclads blown apart by cannons. Spanish conquistadors ambushed by natives. British privateers, French explorers, they all died here, and they all left ghosts. And the fog collected every single one." A figure approached through the mist. It was hard to tell if it was male or female, young or old. Its face kept shifting, aging and de-aging, features blurring and resharpening. When it spoke, its voice was hollow, echoing, like it was coming from very far away. "You're new," it said, looking at me with empty eyes. "Still mostly real. I can see your edges, but you're fading fast. Give it a few more days and you'll be like us. Transparent, forgotten, lost." "Who are you?" I asked. It frowned, struggling with the concept. "I was someone. I know I was. I had a name. I had a life. I was crossing, trying to get home. But I crossed too many times, lost my name first, then my face, then everything else. Now I'm just here, forever here. Do you know how long forever is when you can't remember who you are?" More figures gathered around us, drawn by the presence of someone still mostly alive. They reached out with translucent hands, not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel the cold radiating from them. "Take me with you," one whispered. "Help me remember," another begged. "I had a family, I know I did, children, I can almost see their faces." "What were their names?" "Please," a third one said. "Please, just tell me my name. Someone must remember, someone must know who I was." Lafitte put a hand on my shoulder and pulled me back. We need to go. They'll drain what's left of you if we stay. They don't mean to, but they're so hungry for memory, for identity, they can't help themselves. As we rowed away, I looked back at the lost souls in the fog. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all trapped in the between place, all forgotten by the world. Is that what happens to me if I seal the fog line? No, Lafitte said. If you seal it, you become something else. Not lost, but not alive either. The guardian, the keeper of the boundary. You'll exist in both times simultaneously, forever watching, forever making sure they don't bleed into each other again. And if I don't seal it, the barrier fails completely. 1814 and 1998 merge. The timelines collapse into each other. History unravels. Everyone in both eras either dies or goes mad, unable to tell past from present, unable to distinguish memory from reality, and then it spreads, like a disease. Other years start collapsing. 1813, 1997. The wound grows until all of time is just one eternal present where nothing makes sense. Those are my only options? Become a guardian ghost or let everyone die? Those are everyone's options who cross too many times, he said. You just happened to be the one who crossed enough, who cared enough, who was stubborn enough to make the choice matter. We returned to the pirate fleet just as the sun was rising. Except it wasn't one sun. Through the failing fog barrier, I could see two suns, one from each time, occupying the same space but slightly offset. The effect was dizzying, nauseating. And that's when I heard it. Distant thunder, except it wasn't thunder. Cannon fire. They're here, Lafitte said, his face grim. Earlier than I expected. The British advance forces. The battle has begun. Over the next few hours, I watched history unfold. British ships appearing through the fog, their cannons firing at American positions on shore. Jackson's forces returning fire. Pirates preparing for battle, loading their own cannons, sharpening cutlasses, checking powder and shot. And through it all the fog pulsed and swirled, growing thicker, darker, more aggressive. Every cannon blast seemed to tear it wider. Every death fed it, strengthened it. By noon, I could see boats from my time appearing in the distance. Modern fishing vessels suddenly finding themselves in the middle of a naval battle. I heard screams as people from 1998 saw sailing ships and pirates and realized they'd crossed into the past. Saw confusion on the faces of British sailors as modern boats appeared out of nowhere. The barrier was collapsing. Lafitte found me on the deck of La Damnation. It's time. The wound is opening. You need to go now, into the center of it, or it'll be too late. What do I do? Find the wound. You'll know it when you see it. It's the tear in reality where both times meet. And then, he hesitated. Then you pour yourself into it. All of yourself. Every memory, every thought, every piece of identity you have left. You use yourself to seal it shut. And after? There is no after. You become the seal, forever watching, forever guarding, forever making sure it doesn't tear open again. You'll exist in both times simultaneously, able to see both but belonging to neither. The living will forget you. The dead won't remember you. You'll be alone, truly alone, for eternity. I thought about Celeste one last time. Tried to remember her face, her voice, her laugh. Tried to hold on to that feeling of love I knew I'd once had for her. Nothing came. Just a name and the abstract knowledge that she'd been important to me once. I thought about Marie, my daughter. The little girl who'd asked me if I still loved her, who'd cried because she wanted her real dad back. Even her name was starting to fade, the syllables becoming meaningless sounds. "If I do this," I said, "will they remember me? Will anyone remember that I existed?" Lafitte's expression was answer enough. "The fog will take even that. When you become the seal, you'll erase yourself from both timelines. You'll have never existed. Celeste will have married someone else. Your daughter will have a different father. Your mother will have had different children. The only ones who'll remember you are the lost souls in the fog, and they can't remember anything for long. So I'm not just sacrificing my future. I'm erasing my past, too. Yes, I looked out at the battle raging around us, at the modern boats trapped in 1814, their passengers terrified and confused, at the British ships firing on American positions, at the fog growing thicker with every passing moment, feeding on the chaos and death. This was what duty meant. Not just putting yourself in danger, but erasing yourself completely, becoming nothing so that others could keep being something. "Show me where to go," I said. Lafitte embraced me, a quick, fierce hug. "Thank you for what you're about to do. The world won't remember you, but I will. For as long as I exist in this moment, I'll remember Antoine Doucet, the cop who gave everything." He had Pierre row me out into the thickest part of the fog, to where the barrier was tearing itself apart. Pierre said nothing, but when we reached the spot, he gripped my hand hard. "Fair winds, officer. May you find peace in the between place." Then I was alone, floating in my patrol boat in a sea of white. The fog was so thick now I couldn't see the water beneath me, couldn't see the sky above, just white in every direction, pulsing and swirling like a living thing. And then I saw it. The wound. It looked like a tear in fabric, except the fabric was reality itself. A jagged rent in the air where both times met and bled into each other. Through it, I could see both eras simultaneously, overlapping, fighting for dominance. 1814 pirates and 1998 tourists occupying the same space. Ships from different centuries trying to exist in the same water. The past and present grinding against each other, sparks flying where they met. The wound pulsed like an artery, bleeding centuries into each other with every beat. I stood up in my boat, took a deep breath, and dove into the water, swam toward the wound through fog so thick it was more solid than the water. Every stroke was agony, like swimming through concrete. When I reached the wound, I understood what Lafitte had meant. I could feel it pulling at me, hungry, desperate. It wanted to be sealed, needed to be sealed, but it needed something to seal it with, needed substance, needed identity, needed someone to stand guard forever. I reached for it, and the moment I touched it, I understood everything. The fog wasn't evil. It was just a scar, a wound in time trying to heal itself, but unable to because the injury kept getting reopened. Every battle, every death, every crossing tore it wider. It needed a guardian, someone to hold it closed, to prevent it from being torn open again. I thought of Celeste one last time, tried desperately to remember her face, got nothing but a blur, a ghost, a shadow of a memory. I thought of Marie, my daughter, my little girl. The name meant nothing to me now. I let go, stopped fighting, and poured myself into the wound. It hurt. God, it hurt in ways I didn't know existence could hurt. Every memory I had left, ripped out. Every piece of identity, shredded and scattered. Every connection to the world, severed. I felt myself coming apart, dissolving, spreading out across the barrier between times. My name, gone. My face, gone. My life, my loves, my fears, my hopes, gone. All gone, fed into the wound to seal it shut. and then there was nothing, or everything, or both simultaneously. I was the fog. I was the barrier. I was the guardian standing watch between 1814 and 1998, making sure they stayed separate, making sure the wound stayed closed. I could see both times at once. Could see Lafitte's fleet sailing away after the battle ended, victorious. Could see modern boats returning to the bayou in 1998, their passengers confused about the time they'd lost but unable to explain why. I could see everything and nothing, was everywhere and nowhere. I tried to remember who I'd been, what I'd sacrificed. But there was nothing to remember. The fog had taken it all. All that remained was purpose, duty, the eternal vigil. And sometimes, very rarely, when someone approached the fog line in a boat, when they got close enough to see the wall of white, I could reach out, could whisper a warning, turn back, don't cross. The fog takes everything. They never listened. Someone always crossed. And I was there, watching, warning, guarding. Forever watching, forever alone, forever between. The fog line had claimed its guardian, and the world forgot I'd ever existed. But I remained, will always remain. As long as time exists, as long as 1814 and 1998 need to be kept separate, I'll be here, in the white, in the cold, in the between place, watching, waiting, warning those who can still turn back. The fog is hungry. The fog is patient. The fog remembers what the world forgets. And I am the fog now. Forever and always. The line between times must hold. And I am the one who holds it.